Hello, welcome to part two of our interconnecting web apps using OAuth series. In the last video, I laid some foundation on how you can connect applications, retrieve content resource from external applications without using OAuth. I think it was Ajax we used to send a request to another application. And we saw how we can use pause policy to limit access to that application. In this video, we want to use OAuth. We want to use OAuth. This is the part two of the series. There's going to be a part three. We'll be using OAuth here. So let me share my screen. So I basically, yeah, I believe you can see my screen. I basically have an application. This is a web API. It's not a web app, it's a web API. So what this application does is that it um it's connected to a data store where it feeds content from. The data store can be anything. It can even be hard coded data. So it gets content from the data store. So that's what this application does. And what we want to do is, so before we start to build multiple applications connected to each other, I'll be using Postman just to illustrate what we are really doing. So what Postman is going to be doing is that Postman will be sending a request to this application, and um, Postman will be expecting some kind of response from this application. And we won't be doing it in the conventional way, rather, we'll be using OAuth standard to get to authorize our API requests. So let me just quickly go through this application. So before I even go through it, let me just lay some um, foundation on what we are really doing and how what we are doing now differs from what we've been doing before. So so previously we were using OAuth, but we were directly authorizing um OAuth to some resources on Azure. So we were using Postman to kind of like use OAuth to authorize to get resource from maybe storage account or a key vault or something. So we're working directly with resources on Azure. But in this case, that's not what we are doing. We are working with external application. So even though I'm using a storage account in the background, but um, it can be anything. And I am not even using our role-based access control, the client ID and the likes to authenticate the storage account. I'm using a connection string. So this isn't we are not applying OAuth at all when it comes to the connection between the application and the storage accounts. So the OAuth that we are going to be the tokenization and the bearer authentication and things around that will be between Postman and this application. So let me just quickly go through the application. So over here, you can see we have a connection string here, and it's just for me to get access to the data store. Very straightforward. This is giving me access to a container called data, and this is the name of the blob that I am requesting access to, and we are just storing all this and retrieving content from it. But where is even more interesting is the okay, let me scroll up. The controller, yeah, the controller. So we have this authorize here, and if I should, this authorize is what is securing our API. So this API that we are building in this application, this web API, because we have this authorize here, that's why any requests to this application without following the without getting a validated token will be declined, will not be accepted. So if I should comment this out, it's not going to work if when we run this application. So I'm leaving it because I have set up OAuth in place. So it's a very simple application. Most of the content we've worked with it already. This is the model, the same model we've been using. That's basically it. There's nothing else that is out of the blues. We've been working with this since, so it's still the same content. Yeah. So I think that basically is most of the um special functionalities in the controller. And I think a little is also in the service file. So let me stop sharing. So I've already hosted this application in Microsoft Azure. So to host, you just come over here, right click, publish, and you publish to Azure. That's basically it. So what I will do now is let me go over to Microsoft Azure. Um, I'll be sharing my screen. Yeah. So I'll just go through the process on the Azure side so that it will be clear on what we need to do. I've outlined the key areas I want to lay emphasis on the flow so that it will be easier to go. So I've already covered the authorization line that makes our API protected, that prevents just um, any kind of clients to be able to get resources from the API. So that line where we have authorized that I showed you in Visual Studio, that's what does that. Then another thing I want to emphasize on is that so I created an application object. So this is the process of getting our postman to be able to get a valid token. So I created an application object for the application. And so let me go over to my app registration. So this is the application object that was created. Why can't I right click? Okay, let me just click. Yeah, this is the application object that was created for the web API. That's the application in Visual Studio. Then what we'll do is um you take note of the so I've gone to my certificates and secrets. So I do not have any here. So let me see. Okay, I actually do not need a secret here. Sorry. So all I just need is the client ID and the tenant ID. So this client ID and the tenant ID, I would copy it and I would use it in my application. So I'll paste it in my Visual Studio. So in the Visual Studio app setting.json file is where I will slot in my client ID and client secret. Let me just confirm that it's the same. So the client ID here is 8EA blah blah blah, and it's 8EA blah 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 we have here. So it's the same. So this client ID you copy it, the tenant ID, copy it and use it in the app setting.json in Visual Studio. That's for the web API that you are creating. That's one key thing that you need to have done. The second thing is that you would go over to app roles. So this is our app roles here. You click on it, then you create a new app role, create app role. That's where we have this. So because I already created it, let me just click on it so that we'll see what is contained in here. So we have the display name, you give it any name. What is important is that you choose applications because we want it, we do not want it to be delegated. We do not want it to be delegated. We want it to be, it's an application we want to use it for. Then give it a value, cost.read. This is key because we're still going to reference this as the value for our resource. Then give it any description, enable it, and you are good. Yeah, so that's basically what we have there. So let me just close this. The third key takeaway that needs to be taken note of is that you need to create another application object, and this second application object is for Postman. So you create that application object for Postman. So let me go over to so this is the one I created, Postman object. So from what we have here, you go to API permission. That's the one for Postman. You go to API permission, click on API permissions, then you click to add a permission. You click to add a permission. So what we have here is what I want to do. So you click over here, but instead of choosing something from the Graph API, we are going to My APIs, and you would see what you created with your, that's the object from for your web API over here. And when you click on it, you will see that it is application based, and you'll be able to see the type as application, and you see the name. I said we are still going to use that course.read. You can see it's being referenced there. So that's the second key thing that you need to have done. So you can see now that we have linked the Postman object with the web API object. You can see the connection between them. So this is what will make it possible for us to use Postman to request for a token. So the next core thing that we'll need to do is you go over to Postman, you open Postman. So I would open Postman and I will share my Postman screen. Let me see if I still have the documentation I used to get the URL for Postman. I've closed it, but that's fine. I can still show it to you. URL structure when you are requesting towards Postman. So let me stop sharing and I'll share Postman. Okay, so we're on Postman now. We're in Postman. So what I want to do is yeah, so this is the URL I want us to take note of. This is the URL that gives us our token. So what you need to take note of is this is login.microsoftonline.com is standard. We are requesting for a token from Microsoft. So this is the URL we use. So what is unique is that this is our tenant ID. So we need to input our tenant ID. We need to input our tenant ID over here. Then you need to enter OAuth 2. So you can even get this. Why was I even looking for documentation? It's even in our Azure portal. When you open your object, your application object, you can click on endpoint and you see this a sample of this URL that you can use. I think let me show that to you so that before I will return back to Postman, but let me just show us that. Let me go back to Edge. Yeah, so this is the application object. So you just click on endpoint and you get the URL. You can see the URL here. So depending on your scenario, you would copy the one that applies to you. You can see what. So basically, I am using the token endpoint, but for version 1. So I'm using this. This is basically what I'm using. So let me stop sharing and I'll go back to my Postman. Yeah, I'm back to my Postman. Then what I will do now is I would I'll send a request. So there are a couple of parameters that you need to have entered. Let me look for one that I know I've used. Okay, so I've used that. I think I'm in the wrong. I should go to body. Yeah, so this is where I need to be. So these are the 4 parameters that is important that you have as part of to get a token. So the grant type, we are using client credentials, the client's ID. We have the client ID for our Postman. So this is the client ID for Postman. Then client secret as well. This client secret was generated using the Postman application object. Then the resource, this resource was gotten from, did I show this to you? So you click on expose an API. So let me just quickly show this to you from Edge so that you see how I got that resource URL. So you go over to expose an API, click on this. So you are going to do this from the web API application object. So previously we went to app rules, but now we want to expose an API. So you click on this and you click on add scope. So once you add a scope, you see this automatically generated for you. And it's based on your client ID, 8E, blah, 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 is the client ID, and it's attached to this. So you see this is the URL that you need to copy and use as your resource. So this is the URL that you need to use. This is as against, so rather than approach it this way by exposing an API this way, if I were to use multiple applications, if I wanted multiple applications to connect to each other and I am not using Postman, this particular URL will be referenced in our code. I'll be defining a scope in our code and I'll be showing that to you very soon. But let's just focus on what we are doing here. So copy this and I'll go back to Postman. I'll go back to Postman and you can see it over here. So this is the resource that is of interest to us. This is the client secret that was generated. This is the client ID and the grant type. So if everything works well, we want to request for an access token. So after getting the access token, we will now want to use that access token to request for a resource on um, from the web app. So if I should go to my web app URL, this is my web app, and I try to request for a resource, it would send me 41 unauthorized error. So if I should send, okay, let me delete this access token. So let me send this. Yeah, you can see unauthorized. If I should come here, okay, let me go to cookies, no, headers, and you see that um it will tell us the reason for the error. Is it test results? Let me see. Okay, under headers, you can see application ID is empty. But you can also come here and you see in more detail what is really happening. So it didn't contain any token, so that's why it's giving an unauthorized error. What I'm even looking for, I'm not getting it. Let me see. Okay, but that's fine. So what I want to do is I'll come over here. I would try to request for a token to see if I can get a token. So I'm sending this now, and I have my token. So you can see I have a BR token. So what needs to be done is you need to copy this BR token, copy it. Did I even show you the content of the storage account so that you will know what you're expecting? So it's the same JSON file that we've been using since. Just contains some information on some courses, the ID, name, and rating. So authorization, then under value, you just enter bearer and enter the value of your token value. And with this, when you send a request, you should be able to um to access